Welcome back, everybody, to another Cobra Kai Season 3 watch party. The theories about who is going to be back in Season 3 have been going on since Season 2's release. Will it be Terry Silver, Mike Barnes, or Ali Schwarber? Come to think of it, people were predicting they would return in Season 2 as well. I guess that's a good strategy. Just keep predicting they'll be back every season, and sooner or later you'll be right. Otherwise, the one character we do know is coming back is this guy, Principal Lopez. He was the last name on the cast sheet we were able to see, and he is almost certainly going to be in a scene with Daniel and Amanda. We also know this scene will have a new character, Officer Jackson. Now, some may think it's strange Officer Jackson is in this scene. We know from his backstory he's normally looking for smooth criminals, and even though Sammy is okay, he's here to make sure no one moonwalks out of responsibility. Plus, my understanding is after a school fight of any significance, it's not uncommon for a police officer or resource officer to be with the principal while meeting with the parents. In many cases, the officer is the voice of reality to oppose the principal. Which brings us to Lopez, the principal of West Valley High. Now, one thing I have been reliably told is that if you talk to the various faculty in a school, you will immediately learn that the dumbest people in any school are the administrators. Yes, even dumber than the guidance counselors. And the head administrator is the principal. Now, the show always aims for a degree of realism, so even though we don't know much about this guy, based on his position alone, we can reasonably discern Principal Lopez is the dumbest character in the series thus far. I mean, look at that face. Yes, even dumber than her. I know, I couldn't believe it either. In situations like this, often principals demonstrate their lack of intelligence and common sense by trying to apply the school district's zero-tolerance policies in situations where it makes no sense. For now, let's not worry about that. In Bitch Started It, I gave you all a little homework, namely this. Do you think she told her parents the truth about what this fight was over? Or maybe she said something like Tory was angry about the drinking game from Moon's party. Now, the answer to that is very significant because when they walk into this meeting, that is the first thing that will be on their mind. It's their baseline and starting point. And for what it's worth, my answer is no. I don't think she told her parents the truth about the fight. I really think she said something more along the lines that Tory was angry about the drinking game and wanted to get her back. You can imagine that is something Sam would say in the moment, and it almost sort of makes sense because the drinking game did happen and Tory lost. And since they already know Sam was drunk and slept at Johnny's, the story would be believable. And look, I'm pretty hard on Sam, and I will be even more in the future, but I think this is one lie where we can have a little empathy for her. You can imagine laying in a hospital bed getting stitches with bruises across your face and body while looking up at your panicking parents. It would be hard to explain this fight broke out because you were cheating with someone. You thought you were alone, but you got caught. Here Sam would have to explain that she was cheating on Robby with Miguel, all the while knowing how strongly her father disapproves of Miguel.
I'm supposed to be upset that my daughter has broken up with Cobra Kai's top bully?
Look at Amanda and look at Daniel. Is he acting like she just told him she was kissing Miguel again?
I'm Miguel's mom. I'm sorry to hear they broke up.
Yeah, same.
Because I don't think he would be like that. While they may both be concerned she's alright, their reaction would be different, especially when she says all she cares about is Miguel and claims it's her fault. Mom cries with her and Daniel tells her not to say or think like that. So I don't think she told them the truth about the fight, and while we can have empathy for Sam here, the only problem is what happens when you put lies on top of lies. Sooner or later, the house of cards is coming down. That is what is about to happen. So let's talk about the scene. I'm going to save the characters not in the scene, namely Sam and Tory, for another video. I want to focus on the characters who are in the scene, namely Daniel and Amanda. For starters, I imagine the scene taking place the next day. Like we had the school fight in the morning, all this was afternoon, then we were in the evening here, but the question is what time? How late is it? Luckily, I think I found a way to crack it. The key is with the very last shot here. Let's freeze here and see what we can come up with. Now this is going to be a hard one, so you'll have to bear with me. Now obviously this is on a sharp angle relative to us. If we want to even have a chance of deciphering this, we're going to have to spin it around here and get that straightened out. Okay, there we go. Now let's see what we can make of this. On the first number, I see a slash here and here, so I'm going to call that a 7. Pretty sure about that. Now let's skip to the third number. You can see this is pretty busy. There's stuff going on all over. This gives us a few choices. It could be a 5. I mean, a 5 has a lot going on, especially with that hat. But I think it's closer to a 3. Except if you notice the number 3 is sort of heavy on the right but less on the left. I feel like this number is heavy all over. I think I'm going to go with an 8 on this one. Now the middle digit is very tricky. It appears mostly straight and singular and looks a lot like a lowercase l. The problem is I'm not really sure how that fits. Is this phone displaying the time in some sort of code, or perhaps this is some military time I'm not familiar with? But if you look really close at the top, you can see something extending off to the left. Now I originally thought that was just blur from the picture, but after close inspection, I think that is part of the number, and I think this is a 1. Now this part here is totally indecipherable, but we can gather from this shot that the sun is setting here, not rising. So I'm going to say this is PM, and realize this is not a semicolon. This is a regular colon. So when we put it all together, we can surmise the last shot of season 2 was at 7:18 p.m. That's my best theory on the exact time at the end of season 2. If you think it's something else or have another idea, please let me know in the comments below. Now, as for the scene in question, I think it will take place the next day, first thing in the morning. I think that makes sense considering Sam's condition. They weren't meeting that day. Now, when we think about the very beginning of the scene, we can probably assume no one has gotten much sleep. Most parents couldn't sleep soundly after something like that happens, and for Daniel especially after he was taking down a picture of Mr. Miyagi and apologizing to it. And for what it's worth, Principal Lopez was probably up all night dealing with various principal stuff. So they'll come in and shake hands, give introductions, and say lines like, "I wish we could be meeting under better circumstances." Then an exhausted Daniel and Amanda take a seat right where Stingray was sitting. So that's likely the beginning of the scene. Let's skip to the end. Ask yourself, how do you imagine the end of this scene? Do you imagine Amanda giving Lopez a big hug, Daniel shaking Officer Jackson's hand, and everyone saying lines like, "It's tough, but we'll get through it together"? If that's how the scene ended, does that seem exciting to you? If we begin with a handshake and end with hugs, then what really happened? That's not very dramatic, and to be dramatic, we need some drama. You know drama, like maybe instead the scene will end with some shouting, accusations, suggestions on where to shove certain objects or school policy, maybe a chair or piece of furniture gets knocked over or thrown, all sorts of chaos. Does that seem more exciting, more dramatic, if we open with tired, weary parents shaking hands with the principal and then end with a shouting match, 2 thrown chairs and a broken window? The point is, stuff happens in a scene. It's the root of drama. You've seen it before. You remember season 2 opened with Kreese trying to shake Johnny's hand and ended with a fucking fire breaking out. And of course there are other times in the show where things started tense and confused, then escalated quickly. And we know this is the beginning of the season, and this will likely lay the foundation and tone for the season, especially for Daniel. You remember Daniel will be in Okinawa for a soul-searching return to Miyagi-Do roots. You think before he does any soul-searching, he has to do some soul-losing? So with basic logic, we have an idea for the beginning of the scene. And since stuff has to happen, we can guess at the end of the scene. What happens in the middle? That's a good question, and before we get to that, I want to point something out. I don't know if this has been overlooked or I just haven't seen anyone talk about it, but there's one important point to keep in mind as Daniel and Amanda meet with Lopez.
Amanda told me Robby's going to his valley.
He is? How?
We enrolled him. That's the rule. You stay with us, you go to school.
I think this has been overlooked. Daniel and Amanda enrolled Robby in the school and most certainly listed themselves as Robby's guardians. So think of it from Lopez's perspective. He's meeting with the people responsible for two of the four main fighters in the brawl, and especially Robby, who after Miguel chose to stop the fight, attacked and kicked him over the railing. So he's dealing with a hysterical mother whose son may die, and he's staring at the parents, well, the guardians of the boy in question. He doesn't know Johnny drove Robby to school that day, and frankly, he may not care. And while we don't know if the LaRussos actually had full legal custody or not, I don't think the show's going to make that distinction. I do think Robby will be discussed first, as it is the most pressing issue, and I'm not sure Lopez will react well to stuff like this.
Thought I could help him. But he's got his own family. I need to focus on mine.
And while Amanda will be the calm one who brings Daniel's focus back, they both like Robby. They believed in him and wanted to help him. This is a somber discussion because Miguel won the fight and was willing to stop and let Robby go, to show mercy as it were. Except Robby didn't, and Miguel may die. To make it all worse, the mother of the victim is in a no-mercy mood herself. You can't blame her. Any mother seeing that happen to her only son would feel that way. Daniel and Amanda will plead for Robby, but considering he ran away, there's very little that can be done at the moment. And on this down moment, we transition to Sam. Now the problem here is Daniel. Pretty boy Daniel LaRusso has had the fangirls' love since the 80s. He's perfect. Well, almost perfect. He has always had that temper, and it's certainly gotten him into trouble more than a few times. You know, he's mellowed a little with age, well, mostly. There is one thing that still triggers his temper.
And maybe you don't know your daughter as well as you think you do. Get your house in order, LaRusso.
Who the hell you think you're talking to?
It really gets to him. He's very protective of Samantha, maybe even a little possessive. That could make for a good dad, but like when he was younger, it does tend to cause trouble. Luckily, that's not the situation here. What Lopez needs to explain here is why in the hell was this girl able to threaten his daughter and attack her with a freaking weapon like that, and no one did anything. And it's understandable he would feel so upset, but he needs to understand district policy instructs teachers not to break up any fights between students. Instead, they need to wait for the police to come and stop the fight. If a teacher does try, he could be seriously injured himself, which is exactly what happened here. It's a liability issue, you see. But look, they just want to know that this girl will never be allowed in school again, and they shouldn't worry. The board will be handling the discipline of everyone involved and is very intent to make sure this doesn't happen again. In fact, the parents and whole community mostly just want that, to make sure this never happens again. And of course, that's something Daniel and Amanda would agree with. And not to worry, the school takes no interest in the personal lives of the students. He doesn't care about who's dating who or who's kissing whose boyfriend, and that's great, but what does this have to do with Samantha? Well, apparently this all started when Samantha was sneaking off to kiss Miguel, who was in a relationship with Tory. Except everyone knows Sam wouldn't do that. She doesn't even like Miguel. She broke up with him months ago. What are you saying? Well, all Lopez can say is that is the one point everyone agreed on. Daniel won't buy it. This girl is a liar. You know all these Cobra Kai kids are liars. This whole stupid fight was because Sam embarrassed her in front of her friends in some drinking game. This girl is messed up. You can't believe a word she says. Anyone who does is demented. You can understand Daniel here. The principal is supposed to be the reasonable and intelligent one, not a fool who believes obvious lies like that. But then it's going to get worse. The LaRussos and Sam will have to come to the board meeting to determine her role in the fight and whatever repercussions they decide on. Now Daniel would want to know, what the hell do you mean her role in the fight? Being attacked by a mad girl is not participating in a fight. It's defending yourself, and she has every right to defend herself. And of course, Lopez agrees on that, but you see, school policy considers any willing participant of the fight to be culpable, and frankly, charging at the other girl to attack her isn't exactly self-defense. That's straight offense, and participating in the fight. Now Daniel will certainly tell him he doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. When the fight comes to you, you have to be ready to fight back, to defend yourself. That's what he teaches to all his students. Of course, that's why there were 30 kids in the fight and not just 4. And anyway, school policy is clear here, and frankly, there are hundreds of angry parents that don't want this going on in their school. And we can be certain Daniel would inform Principal Lopez that if he knew anything about fighting, he would know that to defend yourself, you have to use some offense, and would he perhaps like a demonstration? And eventually things escalate from there. I don't see how Daniel keeps his cool through all this. I think this scene is going to end on a high note, so to speak. And keep in mind, Officer Jackson is here too, to explain this stuff and maybe stop Daniel if he completely loses it. But he also has to explain the situation with Sam. And for what it's worth, I think it is unlikely they're going to arrest Sam too. Right now, I'd put the odds at about 20%. That's a sort of Nate Silver prediction. It's low enough I can say it wasn't likely, but if it happens, I can say I'd claim there was a 1 in 5 chance of it happening. Mostly, I don't think the show will go in that direction. Plus, an arrest doesn't actually mean the person will be charged with a crime. Legal standards are different from school policies. All of this will depend on factors such as how much public pressure is on these people, plus a few other points I'll get to in another video. But it's something for you to consider. Subscribe to the channel and you'll be able to see that video as soon as it comes out. Do you think Daniel could completely lose it here, or do you think he sits calmly and passively as this idiot guy tries to blame his daughter? What if this scene ends with Daniel getting arrested? Do you think that could happen? Please give a thumbs up and let me know. On our next watch party, we're going to take a look at Sam and her friends, Yasmin, Moon, and especially Aisha. In the meantime, if you want to see a video on who I predicted ends up in Okinawa, click that thumbnail there. That's a great video. Otherwise, check out some of the other great videos on my channel and subscribe to get more. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again very soon.
Still nothing from Tory?
You think she got in trouble with the cops?
I don't know. But missing the first day of school is not a good sign.